After more than 10 years of research and trials, commercial farming of whitebait in New Zealand has become a reality. The breakthrough came about with development of the capability to breed a native fish, the giant cockapoo, in captivity. Paul Decker explains.
The cycle of whitebait is that the parent fish live in freshwater. They lay their eggs in freshwater, and after 27 days the eggs hatch and wash out to sea as baby little fish. The little fish then move around the coast of New Zealand. As they come into maturity, as in about that 12-week period, they smell the pheromones of their same family coming out of the rivers, and they then do a turn and start heading up the river to replace the parents and live there happily ever after. 10, 12 years ago, we started a native fish hatchery, a conservation hatchery, as a extended hobby, and that went on from there really. We then started reproducing native fish, had successes and failures, and built on the successes, and eventually decided that we obviously have to make a commercial decision at some stage. So the giant cockapoo, one of the whitebait species, showed promise as an aquaculture species. Its main attributes were that it gives reasonable fecundity. We get roughly around about 25,000, 30,000 eggs off a fish. They breed once a year, they live for 30 years. Their care is reasonable once you know what to do, reasonably easy. So they just started ticking all the boxes really. We've reached the point where now at a commercial stage. We produced this last year over a tonne that we sold within the marketplace. To do market trials with a tonne of product is quite significant. And then as someone said to me, a tonne of whitebait is quite significant, which is quite true. This year we'll do 4 or 5 tonne as we ramp it up. And next year we're hoping to do 20 tonne, 30 tonne. We've got enough broodstock that we've been collecting and breeding and maintaining that could give us up to 50 tonne if we had a big enough facility. As an aquaculturalist, I think the difficulty we had was that you have a freshwater fish farm for your breeding fish, and you have a saltwater fish farm for your whitebait production. And you've got to make sure you don't turn the wrong tap on. And that in itself means you've got to have expertise in both disciplines, and they're very, very different. That was quite challenging, and we've now got to the point where we do keep one total facility for freshwater broodstock production, and the other facility is saltwater for whitebait production. We're very lucky to have people like Dr. Tugrid Kirby on staff. She's been with us for 15 years, since the beginning of the whole project. With the staff's background and the amount of trials that we undertook, we've cracked the food requirements of the species, no doubt about it. And part of that is when they're newly hatched, we start feeding them baby shrimp called Artemia, and those are produced in this room, and we then feed them that product for several weeks, and during that several weeks we wean them onto dry food. They're on dry food for around about another 7 weeks, and then they're harvested. They're 12 weeks old when they're harvested to market, which is pretty amazing for an aquaculture species. The tank that you're looking at is 2 weeks old, so they'll be harvested in 10 weeks, and there's approximately 50 kilos of product will come out of that tank. Aquaculture is no different to farming any animal like a cattle, beast or sheep. You grade, you cull, you manage. We keep all our females together so that they breed when we tell them to breed, rather than mixing them with the males. Once we've identified fish that are ready, we do what we call dry strip. And the dry stripping is the process where you physically extract the eggs from the female, you physically extract the milt, mix it together in your time frame, and then you start the incubation process. And mum and dad go back to their tanks, and next year the same thing will happen again. And meantime, that crop of eggs is growing on to product.
New Zealand Prima Whitebait is the company that's been formed to commercialise the work that was done by Mahurangi Technical Institute, Paul and the team, into the breeding of the captive species. The majority of the shareholders in New Zealand Prima Whitebait are Māori trusts and corporations and individual investors. One of the things that the shareholders have been committed to very early on was the assisting to restore the wild population. Now, of course, restocking is not the only answer to that. Water conditions and habitat and all those sort of things are important, but if we can breed the fish for return, then that's a small contribution that we can make. We certainly think that longer term that the market for a more sustainable whitebait product compared to, say, wild catch is going to be more valuable in the long term, and in the end, the wild fishery is just not sustainable in its current format. So from a purely commercial point of view, all of those are opportunities for the company. The market for the company initially is definitely a domestic market. It's well known, it's highly sought after. It's only available for a very short season at the moment in the wild stocks. We can, over time, develop our fishery to be providing fresh whitebait 12 months of the year. So clearly a domestic market is a really important first step for us. In saying that, New Zealand whitebait is well known in Australia. The chefs in Australia are well aware of it. There was a big Kiwi expat population who know about it. So Australia is also an option. And then really, I guess it's unusual in that it's not a widely known global species, aquaculture species. So there will be some work to determine where to go. There are some attractive international markets if we can get the product right and get to the volume. But definitely in the short term, it's a New Zealand focused market.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.